Hello and welcome to the sermon for Vocations Sunday. My name is Tim Goodbody and I am the Diocesan Director of Ordinands, which means I am responsible for recruiting new clergy. You might therefore be about to switch off if you think that you are expecting a sermon just about ordained vocations. But let me reassure you that while those things will get a mention, that is not the only focus of what I'm about to say. I hope, therefore, that some of you are still watching. I will be reflecting today on the readings from Acts 9 and John 10, but I want to start by sharing with you a poem by R.S. Thomas, which I have shamelessly stolen from Richard Coles's farewell sermon delivered to his parish at the end of April. The poem is called The Bright Field. I have seen the sun break through to illuminate a small field for a while, and gone my way and forgotten it. But that was the pearl of great price, the one field that had treasure in it. I realise now that I must give all that I have to possess it. Life is not hurrying on to a receding future, nor hankering after an imagined past. It is the turning aside like Moses to the miracle of the lit bush, to a brightness that seemed as transitory as your youth once, but is the eternity that awaits you. What's that got to do with vocation, with calling, you may ask? Well, stick with me. We will get there. First, something else stolen from another great Anglican. I once heard Rowan Williams describe Christian prayer as being like bird watching, because in both of those activities, one spends an awful lot of time alone and cold, sitting on an uncomfortable seat, and nothing happens for ages. But then comes the flash of the kingfisher's wing, which makes it all worthwhile. Then comes that sudden and complete sense of God's presence with us in the here and now, to speak and to listen, just for a moment. But that moment is enough to make us come back and do it again. Just like that kingfisher will motivate us to return to the hide another cold, rainy day. Because the thing is with vocation, with calling, you may well experience people suggesting to you that you ought to think about certain ministries or volunteering opportunities at church or in your community. From joining the PCC to running the creche, to serving the coffee, to leading the intercessions, to volunteering in the food bank, and so on. Those people have obviously seen in you the potential to do those things. And often they can see the benefit too that you will get if you were to undertake them. But for a vocation to anything, for a vocation to be realistic, the church also needs you, because we're all called. The church needs you to be able to express not just the external call the vicar suggested I might like to think about, but also the internal call, the bright field, the kingfisher's wing, that inner sense of God showing you a path, calling you to a ministry at church or elsewhere. The most important words you'll hear today are those of Christ to the Jews in John 10. My sheep hear my voice. I know them, and they follow me. Fundamentally, discipleship is our calling as Christians, the call to follow Jesus. That's not a bolt-on, an add-on. We can't all experience the Damascus Road or the upper room all the time. But when we do have those amazing experiences, it's good to be aware of what they tell us about God's ideas for our lives. So, listen to your master, your shepherd's voice. I have a foster daughter called Tabitha, so the Acts reading is one which is more than familiar to me. Yet there was one phrase which really jumped out at me in my prayerful preparation with this text. He showed her to be alive. He showed her to be alive. Often, when this text is used for a sermon, the preacher talks about Peter. But I want to dwell just for a moment on Tabitha, to see what she can actually teach us about expressing our inner call. When Peter emerged from that room, that house, with a newly restored to life disciple, there would have been, of course, quite an impact. And the event did indeed cause growth in the church in that place. But imagine Tabitha as part of that mission, that outreach, telling her story, giving her testimony, we would call it today. He showed me to be alive, she'd say. He showed me to be alive. Sometimes, when we have an intense, personal, spiritual experience, it can be hard to articulate. But if Tabitha told that story by starting with Peter, with what he did for her, he showed me to be alive, she's actually telling of an amazing work of God by talking about something that one person did. More thievery here. Bishop Roger, the Bishop of Colchester, once spoke about how to tell your story to a large group of people, including me. He suggested on that day that the easiest way to explain what God has done for you, or has said to you, is to talk about the people that enabled that to happen. Tabitha would talk about Peter. I would talk about the people who invited me to participate in a number of events which led to my conversion and ultimately to my vocation too. Who would you talk about? Who was there with you when you turned aside and noticed the miracle of the lit bush? Who was walking with you when you saw that bright field and realised what it was and that you had to have it? Who sat with you in that cold, uncomfortable pew when the kingfisher's wing flashed and you heard the Lord speaking to you? If you can talk about those people, when you tell the story, you'll find yourself talking about what God is doing in your heart, what God is calling you to do. So did you have a bright field? Did you see the blue flash of the kingfisher's wing? If you did, it may well be that God is calling you to serve him in a specific way. But now I need to say something very important, and actually it's for the clergy who may be tuning in today. Brother and sister priests and deacons and bishops, do not assume that someone who expresses a vocation to you is going to end up ordained. They may have a similar story to you. They may be doing things very like the things that you did when you entered the discernment process for ordination. But please, my friends, do not clone yourselves. Let your people go. Let them discover God's call for themselves as themselves without feeling the pressure to be ordained just because you are, just because they are getting lots of support from an ordained minister. I know that that is not an easy thing to do because it happened to me in my parish ministry. A parish priest's default setting is often to look out for more potential parish priests. And we do need them still, of course. But we also have the capacity and the desire to develop lots of other vocational pathways, from spiritual companion to evangelism enabler to authorised local preachers and licensed lay ministers. Information about all of these and more, as well as ordained ministries, can be found on the Diocesan website. The link is in the description of this video. Vocations Sunday is a bit like Christmas or Easter or Pentecost. It's one day when we focus really well on something that's actually very important for the whole year. God, you see, doesn't wait for Vocations Sunday to come around to call people into ministry and service. He does it all through the year. But I am grateful for the opportunity to remind you of that. And I'd like to end by encouraging you to turn intentionally aside, to look for and see that miracle of the lit bush. Do not walk past the bright field, for it is the pearl of great price. Amen.